Just waiting here for a couple moments, waiting for folks to kind of drop in. All right, let's rock. All right, welcome, Tech Art fans. It's noon, it's Friday, and that means it's time for another episode of Tech Art Talk. I am Chris, and I'm going to be your host for today. And today we're going to have another installment of a Procedural Gems interviews. And today we're going to be interacting and having a conversation with Rob Stauffer, who is the Senior Production Product Consultant. Consultant at SideFX Software. And SideFX Software are the folks who make Houdini software, which is all things procedural. And so without dilly-dallying any longer, let's get this interview started. Let me see. Here we go. Welcome to another episode of Procedural Gems. And this time we are going to be having our conversation with Senior Production Consultant at SideFX Software, Rob Stauffer. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much for showing up here.
Sure.
It's long known that I'm a big Houdini fan, and well, I've got my Houdini broadcast a little later today, but thank you very much for going on. Like I said, anything I can do to help or promote the folks at SideFX, I'm more than willing to do.
Awesome. Cool.
I appreciate you taking your time.
Sure.
Well, SideFX has just released version 18.5 of Houdini, and I know that SideFX has a reputation of putting out a lot of content, even on its half versions. So, like,
Yeah.
what are the features that you're most you as the consultant are most excited about right now for this version?
Well, I mean, there's so much great stuff in there. I mean, the kin effect stuff that we've shown for motion retargeting and where we're taking rigging and so on is super exciting. Lots of great tools around Pyro in there as well. But for me personally, I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years dealing with lighting and layout and USD and working a lot in Solaris, which we introduced a couple of versions ago. And so for me, we have a render gallery that we introduced with 18.5, as well as some other enhancements with the light mixer. And so for me, that's where the most fun is right now. I spend most of my time there. And so it's been really fun with some of those new features.
Oh, that sounds really awesome. That's really exciting. Now, I myself am, you mentioned that you got new USD enhancements and so forth, and you've been working with the integration of Solaris. Solaris is Solaris actually built on USD?
So it is. It is. It is native. So when you're working in Solaris, you are working on the USD. We don't ingest it in any way and convert it to like a native format and then spit it back out. It is you are working in USD all the time. So we built it from the ground up with USD as the base.
No, that's really exciting because it's really is its own beast. Now I know that I've covered USD before in the past, but since I haven't had a chance to really work it on a professional level yet, would you give a description of what USD actually is?
Sure. So USD stands for Universal Scene Description. And so it's basically a way to describe everything from cameras to lights to objects in your scene, materials, render settings. And it is meant to be a universal language to sort of bridge that gap between different DCCs. You could argue that it's sort of where people hope the Limbic or FBX might go, but this is sort of the next best thing. And so it's really a nice way to interchange data in a much smoother fashion. And it also is non-destructive. So it operates much like you would in Photoshop with Photoshop layers, how you can, you layer things on top as you make changes. And so that allows greater collaboration between departments, knowing that the effects department or the animation department is not breaking something that environments or layout did. They're merely adding their changes on top of it, and those can be hidden or muted or used or not.
Gotcha. Now you mentioned that USD was non-destructive and kind of created in layers and so forth. It's kind of seems like it's a natural enhancement
to the overall procedural pipeline. Now, what do you see USD playing in as far as proceduralism is concerned?
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, it sort of helps with that. You know, if you imagine in a typical effects pipeline, and as a Houdini effects artist, you're bringing in objects that you might have to fracture, or you're going to run a cloth sim on top of that. And so that stuff, instead of taking that geometry and creating new geometry on top of that, in the case of fracturing, if you're fracturing geometry, obviously you're making a bunch of pieces that didn't exist before. But if you're running a cloth sim or a muscle simulation or something like that, hair simulation, you might not be creating new geometry. You're just moving that geometry. So you're storing just that point information, those point transforms, things like that. So it's non-destructive in that that's a layer that can be put on top of the existing geometry. So there's a term in USD called opinions. And so I would say that my hair movement or my cloth simulation has a stronger opinion than the point positions that are underneath that. And so that's how that would follow through. And so that in itself is procedural. You know, working that way is sort of lends itself to being procedural.
Oh, outstanding. One of the things that I can't remember the exact name of the feature was it allows you to put in different variations of the same asset.
Yeah.
Could you describe that a little bit?
Sure. That's another great feature of USD. It's called variance. And so, you know, imagine a modeling department that has, or, you know, modeling and look dev that have a table that gets broken or maybe has some scratches on it that have a special material on it, or you break off a piece of it or something like that. And typically you would save that as, well, this is table, you know, standard version 1, this would be table damaged version 1, and so on. But with using variants, you would save each of those as a USD asset individually, but then you can make a sort of package USD asset that points at all of those, and each one is stored as a variant. So when you ingest that into your workflow, you get to say you're only choosing one thing, that'll be the table, and then you can decide which variation you want to see at that time or which variant you want to use. And that doesn't just apply to materials or geometry. It could be animation, cameras, lighting, all those things can have some sort of variant.
You know, my tech art brain just kind of spun into a tangent, and I couldn't help but going, gosh, I wonder if we could combine USD with PDG in order to start generating packages, like you said, are variants of assets putting together, and then have massive distributions of things, putting things together into just multiple variations and then passing those through the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've already done tests internally, and I think there's some videos out there where, you know, you're taking an asset, maybe doing some volume destruction on it, you know, using VDBs to chunk something up and doing a bunch of variations of that, and then with PDG, just make that another variant and store out that USD asset. So yeah, the possibilities are definitely there for sure.
Now, you have your finger on the pulse for the film world more so than I do. How well is USD being received into the film world? And do you know anything about where its progress in the game world is?
So for the film world, it is really on an upswing. I mean, when we started down this path, you know, before we really dove in to build Solaris, we were definitely keeping an eye on things and wanted to see where the industry was headed. And now, you know, it's everywhere. Every studio, I feel like, wants to know about it at least and is looking into it. I know several studios have already started to sort of integrate it and work towards a USD workflow in their pipeline, all the way from virtual production all the way down. You know, it could one day be the dream of one asset starts here and lives all the way through the pipeline. So one can hope. For games, I think it's same thing. You know, I think that you know, there's that idea of hopefully getting rid of that translation problem between DCCs and game engines and renderers. That USD helps to try and break that barrier down. So for game companies, I know that there is interest there, and some are starting to look at it, or at least explore what the possibilities are. And we get asked about it all the time, just what we know about it and you know, what our thoughts are.
Do you have any involvement at all with the project going on at NVIDIA? Was it Omniverse?
Omniverse, I do not. And I saw it at the Pipeline conference a couple of years ago at SIGGRAPH, and it looks super cool. But yeah, I don't have any involvement in it.
I guess that's the ultimate dream that I have is, yes, if
Yeah,
I can work in DCC and have it show up in game engine, and
yeah,
there's one-to-one parity back and forth, then I guess that's the hallelujah moment
right, right,
that everyone's been waiting for. That right now is just so frustrating for many beginning artists.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So like, now you work. What is your job technically at SideFX as a production consultant? What do you actually do?
Yeah, good question. No, lots of things. So my main focus, my main job is to interface with the studios, with our clients, and make sure they're getting the most out of Houdini. Make sure we're keeping them up to date on what the new tools are and all of that stuff, and helping teach them when new things do come out. But also, almost more importantly, is listening to them and getting a feel for what is needed out there and what they really, maybe where Houdini needs to improve, and what we can do to help them do all that amazing work. And that's sort of the customer facing side of things. And internally, it's almost, it's kind of the perfect job. I get to do whatever I want as long as it's in Houdini every day. I get to just play and explore and test features as they come out, to give feedback to R&D, and that helps me teach the customers. I'm involved sometimes. There's a few people like me at SideFX, and we'll create educational material. We'll do trade show kind of things. We'll create stuff for our education department for schools and so on, and do a lot of visits and training sessions for them as well.
Well, great. Now, when suddenly a studio comes to you and presents you with a new problem,
Yeah.
A new situation that quite hasn't been dealt with before, could you kind of explain your overall thought process, like how you would approach solving this problem from a procedural perspective?
It depends. That's a good question, and it happens a lot. Especially, there's tons of studios out there that have been using Houdini as long as I have, and I know we both worked at a couple of them. So, they, for them, they kind of have a deep understanding of Houdini, and it's easier for them. But I think on the middle to smaller studio sides, or maybe people that are just starting to adopt Houdini into their pipeline, it takes it takes a little getting used to understand how things can work. So we kind of, it's really breaking down the problem into smaller parts. What in this is a pain point? What is repeatable? I sort of think of it as putting a design guide on top of things. And, what are the things that you might want to change the most, that don't have to be it, people, I think proceduralism scares some people, and they are worried that you'll be able to see the randomness in things. But that's not necessarily, I don't feel that's always the case. I mean, because you have ultimate levels of randomness, so you can make things, it's still ultimately up to you and your eye to really massage how something looks and how something works. So I think it's really, I know I'm getting off topic a little, but just getting that sort of what's repeatable, what are the things that,
So you're looking for patterns?
yeah, what's always going to be the same, or fits within a certain rule that is easy to define and adjust, and make those sort of the base of your procedural part of things, and then that sort of customization or things that are certain for a certain thing will be on top of that.
Okay, great. Now, I was wondering, this is actually a little bit more nostalgic than anything. Now, you and I have kind of evidently our timeframes had overlapped. I just don't remember actually working with you directly, but we were on the same visual effects carousel in Hollywood in the 90s and the 2000s. Now, just kind of curious for yourself, what was the deciding moment for you that kind of sold you on proceduralism?
So this predates Hollywood a little bit for me. I started in Northern Virginia at a little post house called Henniger Video, which is still around today. And we had prisms. We were using prisms, and we
Prisms.
were working on the second iteration of a show of America's Most Wanted. It was called America's Most Wanted: Final Justice, and it was my first introduction to it. And we had to do these maps every episode of like where the criminal went, and it would fly around, and you'd have all these cities. And that was, I didn't build it; it was already there. But that's how I learned how to use prisms. Was like, here, all you have to do is change this, and I was like, that's amazing. Like, that was like, that's so efficient and so awesome. And so that was my very first introduction, and after that, I was hooked. And it wasn't long after that that then Houdini came, it was introduced, and that took over. And so, yeah, I was sold.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I started with prisms as well, and so forth. So the good old prisms days.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, finally, before I let you go, what advice would you give to any artist who wants to learn Houdini or proceduralism, and they want to learn it quickly and effectively as possible? Because there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's easy to get lost.
It is easy to get lost. I would say my number one thing that I say to you is don't be scared. I think that there is a preconceived notion that you have to be a programmer, you have to know how to code, you have to know how to write scripts in order to use Houdini. And I don't believe that entirely. I think that, or yes, it can enhance your experience, but we have the nodes in there for a reason. And just get in there and use the nodes. You'll find there's a lot of things that you can do without having to write those scripts. And then you may get to a point that you graduate to wanting to try that. But uh, I think that holds a lot of people back because there is a lot of awesome looking stuff out there on the web and in behind the scenes that show complex Vex scripts and Python scripts and so on. And people are like, I can't do that. I'm not a programmer. And that's not true. I encourage you to ignore that and push forward and just dive in there because it really is a lot of fun, and you can get carried away with all the cool little things that you can build in Houdini. So
It's just too many knobs and buttons and dials.
yeah,
Well, there's a lot of cool stuff once you understand what all that means.
there's like 20 different ways to do the same thing. So, but don't let that scare you because every way is right. It doesn't matter. And you'll learn the other parts, the efficiency and stuff as you go on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Rob.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great.
I know that you guys have been crazy busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to the audience. So thank you very much.
No problem. You're welcome, Chris.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
All right. We want to make a special call out to Rob and the folks over at SideFX who made time to go and have this interview with us today. It was really appreciated it because I know that they've been very busy. In case you didn't know, Houdini or the SideFX folks just came up with a new version of 18.5, and they're busy trying to promote that and getting that off and going without hitches, and they're all doing a fantastic job. So thank you very much. All right. So join us again next week for yet another version of Tech Art Talk. If you like what you saw today, go ahead and hit the subscribe on the YouTube channel, or go ahead and follow me on the Facebook or on LinkedIn. Check out Chris Rhoda and check out TechArt EDU. And until next time, we'll see you next week. Bye.